This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning. Hello!
I wasn't ready. I just took a big sip of that wine.
What are we drinking?
I thought I had more time.
Okay.
I think it's still Gewürztraminer.
It's Gewürztraminer.
The only thing we can agree on.
It's this really weird white German wine.
It's not weird. It's weird because you think you're bougie and you didn't know about it.
No, it's weird because Germany is not known for its wine. That's a very, very German
let the
word.
Germans have their things.
Gewürztraminer.
Can I keep drinking or should I stop?
Oh, please keep
Away
drinking.
from the mic or
And
into the
why
mic?
why are we drinking tonight?
Because Chelsea wants to talk about No Child Left Behind.
No, I want to talk about Common Core.
I know, but we have to talk about No Child Left Behind to get there.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's why
It's
I'm
the
actually
hoop
drinking.
through which we have to jump.
The Common
to
Core
get to
doesn't,
Common Core.
inherently make me... I mean, it does, but not because of itself, I suppose. No Child Left Behind makes me drink.
Okay, talk to me about No Child. So really our topic tonight is that, we're all tired. We're all tired,
I don't
honestly.
want to.
We don't want to talk about
You
this, but we're
chose
talking
this.
about.
I did the
No,
Googling.
we preordained this subject for this episode.
I think that's why we put it off for so long.
We've been
Neither of
waiting
us
for a
really felt
while
passionate
to
about
record this one. So when we release these, they're not going to be in exactly recorded order because we're trying to, get ahead of the curve. And
we don't want to do this, but I think we have to.
We've been trying to put off this Common Core thing. So we're talking about Common Core, but in order to get there, we have to go through No Child Left Behind.
So I'm going to take my glass, and I'm going to let you do this part.
Talk about No Child Left Behind?
Yes, this is all you.
Oh, okay.
You felt like this was your part, and I support you always.
Yeah, the sort of emergence of Common Core through NCLB. So NCLB was this. This is George W. Right? Who had this brilliant idea. No Child Left Behind. This is actually kind of surprising to me. Well, okay, our very own. We are natives of Ohio. NCLB was co-authored by Representatives John Boehner, Republican from Ohio, George Miller, Democrat from California, and Senators Ted Kennedy and Judd Gregg.
Like actual Ted?
Yeah,
like
Democrat of Massachusetts, real
That's like real
actual Ted Kennedy, and Judd Gregg, Republican of New Hampshire. So, NCLB, it's this thing that happens. President Bush, George W., signs it into law January 8th, 2002. So this is quite a while ago for us. We were in, middle school?
I was 12.
We were 12.
Right, 2002.
So NCLB, what it does, requires all public schools receiving federal funding to administer a statewide standardized test annually to all students. So this is the thing that kind of kicks off the whole obsession with standardized tests. And it's all tied to money.
We were already being tested before.
We were being tested.
Because we had the 4th grade proficiency in Ohio.
But this sort of modern
this is what kickstarted OGT, which is the high graduation test, which just got replaced recently.
So things like the ACT and SAT existed before this, obviously, and AP tests existed before this. But this was the kind of
I think this is when they realized that testing made money.
Yeah. This kicked off the fever pitch of making money through standardized tests. So thank you, George W., for setting us down this dark and twisted path. So we start with NCLB. It's really the thing that sets us on the way to Common Core. So
can we just move on past it, though? Because No Child Left Behind will probably be a separate episode.
We could do an entire episode.
Because I think every essay I wrote in college was about how horrible it was.
Yeah, it's a thing unto itself. But something that emerged kind of like a presidential generation later from NCLB was Common Core. Common Core comes along, led by Barack Obama and Arne Duncan, his Secretary of Education. They are banded standards that have to do with fulfilling some of the aspirations of NCLB, and they are designed...
It's all about proficiency.
Yeah. Common Core standards are designed to try to get every student who goes through a public school in the United States on the same kind of
and
level
have a similar experience
of proficiency. Yes, similar proficiency levels by the time they graduate, similar experiences.
I think it was probably based on accountability, which was a nice thought.
Sure, this is a very complicated subject for me. The ideal, I think, might be noble. The implementation is really horrid.
I don't disagree with that, but I think in thought and in hope it was, to even the playing field, so to speak.
Yeah, that's the attempt,
which I can respect.
And I think
there are definitely worse things happening in education.
Oh, for sure.
So I guess where we come into play, or I come into play in my educational experience, as far as this being year 7 in the classroom, but year 8, I guess, in actual, I don't want to say practice, because I was like student teaching and whatever, but when I was student teaching in 2012, the district that I was at was heavily involved with Race to the Top.
Race to the Top was essentially a bribe to get states to adopt the Common Core standards.
And there's a lot of money involved. And so my student teaching school brought in tons of money and used tons of money with Race to the Top, as far as teacher incentives went.
And close to the same time, slightly before you were student teaching, but close to the same time, I was in college at the time, but I interned at a nonprofit that was essentially advising schools as to how to do their Race to the Top stuff. So how to adopt Common Core standards. Yeah. So the Obama era White House was like, hey, we have these standards. We think it's a good idea for every student to be proficient at a certain level by the time they graduate high school. And to that end, we're going to offer you money if you adopt them.
And money talks.
Money talks a lot. Money if you adopt them by a certain deadline. And
we'll make you eligible to participate in Race to the Top. And then that was a big way for not only... Well, I think that was how so many states probably got into it originally, was that these public schools were like, you know what we need? More money.
Something like 42 states or something.
Since 2010, since 2010, 41 of the 50 U.S. states and the District of Columbia have been members of the Common Core Standards Initiative. This says that Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas, Virginia, Alaska, Nebraska, Indiana, and South Carolina did not adopt the initiative at a state level.
So there are a few who did not adopt at all. There were a few who adopted and then were like, whoa, wait a minute.
And Minnesota just took English and not math, which I like.
That's very interesting.
Go Minnesota. Whatever you're doing, others probably working.
So kind of in the public consciousness, Common Core is this weird, goofy way of doing math. I would boil it down to that.
Come on now.
No. The public, they think
that's
of
what
Common
they've
Core.
seen.
What they think of is the Louis C.K. meme where he's making fun of Common Core math, and he's like, you add the exponent of the map of Mars to the substratum of the geometric. Yeah. Anyway, he's trying to make fun of the Common Core by making it absolutely ridiculous. But I have seen Common Core math aligned curricula that are absolutely baffling. So he might not be too far off, but let's not. We're not at this point.
Well, and when I guess I talk about my
we're not paying attention to Louis C.K.
No, we're not.
We're not listening to him anymore.
As a 10th grade teacher, I don't hate them.
Sure.
But I don't know what it's like for the people not in my setting.
Mean you do not hate the Common Core standards?
I don't.
Sure.
Personally, it gives me a lot of room.
Right. Can you just talk a little bit about what Common Core standards look like to you in your classroom? Because you have other experience on like sort of state boards and things like that. But talk about your classroom experience.
My classroom experience is that I have a lot of freedom in choosing the literature that I teach, which is my favorite part. The only thing that is actually listed literature-wise is that Shakespeare is expected to be taught.
Which, very well, he
at 9 through 12.
Of course.
He should, but he's hard, man.
He's very difficult.
We just survived Caesar, my kids and I, and we are tired.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
I've thought about this a lot since graduating high school and college. I feel like I finally understood Shakespeare in college, but I was required to read Shakespeare in high school, and while I gave it my all at the time and pretended to understand what was happening.
I'm trying really hard.
Yeah, I really, if I'm being completely honest with myself, even though I was a pretty good student in terms of how those things are measured in high school, I'm really not sure that the measure of how I performed accurately reflected my comprehension of Shakespeare.
I don't think that's always the goal of Shakespeare, though. It's an experience.
No, it absolutely it's an appreciation. Is. And I still enjoyed it, but this is a good kind of, I don't know, this is a good kind of interesting point that's either a bonus or a drawback of the Common Core that it requires.
Well, okay, so I teach college prep students. So I have like, as far as our tracking goes, they're like the middle. So we have honors, general CP. So I have the middle students. They're anticipating a 2-year, 4-year program, some sort of bachelor's, ultimately, probably most of them. I don't think it's horrible for them to have this experience. I don't believe that maybe the students on the general track or who are going through like a joint vocational school or some other alternative programs maybe are best suited for Shakespeare. Yeah. But I think that my kids and my college prep students, we can do it. They're not excited, let me be clear, but we can do it.
It's very hard to be excited about Shakespeare in high school, but I want to push back on that just ever so slightly. And that's because I think that even if certain students, no matter their ability level, for whatever reason, if a student doesn't understand all of the Shakespeare play that you're reading, to me, it still seems valuable for them to read it.
I don't
to try to understand it. It tries to get
like
through
Lexile and things like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Many of these kids are not at a level where they could understand it if they did read it.
No, absolutely. It's a real challenge, but I still think...
In Ohio, a lot of our, and this is from the committee that I was just serving on, the testing doesn't always put a focus on that sort of literature. It really likes informational texts.
Which are kind of gross in my mind.
That's fine, but I'm just saying, if we're teaching for a test, which we never are, of course, but some of us are considering it because we really need our data so I can keep my job and I have to feed my dog.
The collective, we are always teaching to the test, if we're being absolutely honest.
You know, I try to work in more of these informational sort of things now because I know that's what they're more likely to see on the test at the end of the course exam. That's going to decide my data, my job, my money, and their high school diploma.
Which is depressing on both counts.
It is.
Because
no one's having fun.
No, absolutely. No one's having fun. What should be happening is that kids are reading the texts that are going to most positively impact their lives in the long run, whether or not they read a text and understand it fully or test well on the text or even it's just, you get a text and the experience of talking about that text and having a teacher interact with you in the classroom setting about it
is important.
If that positively impacts your education, that to me is what should be most important in the calculus of deciding whether or not that text should be read.
I love Caesar and I do my best to make him really relatable. Like I really hit hard like, hi, your best friend stabbed you in the back. Like you all know what this is like. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't want to boil it down to something so simple, but if we can put it into terms where they can at least be like, ugh, I know what that feels like on some like human level, then he's more relatable in some ways, as much as like ancient Rome is relatable to a 15-year-old currently. But my kids are always so much more excited. Like when I talk to former students and even the students in my current classes, they love Of Mice and Men. They love The Crucible. They don't come back and are like, you know what I really loved? Caesar.
Well, I think that, to me, again, I didn't really understand or appreciate Shakespearean text until I had more exposure to complicated flowery language later on in like my college and post-college career. I didn't really have the tools to... It's very difficult to try to relate to a text that you have so much trouble understanding just on a basic kind of vocabulary level. So I totally get that. But at the same time, I still think that, and this depends a great deal on the teacher, but if a teacher can make a text accessible,
I agree,
to a student, regardless of the student's level of understanding of on a Lexile kind of spectrum, I think that's a valuable thing. So I get why Shakespeare is the only text that made it into the ELA standards, the English Language Arts standards.
Oh, I'm fine with it.
Common Core in terms of content. So anyway,
I just don't think that I can sit here and say that all of my coworkers feel the same that I do, because we teach a very different sort of student, and I respect that. And I trust their knowledge of their kid, and I trust my knowledge of my kid. And I say my kid isn't the kids that are, like, enrolled in my class, but...
Right, but okay, but here's the thing
I know our types.
No, you know? I know, but here's the thing about Common Core. Common Core is kind of trying to subvert the idea of types, which is a thing that I appreciate about Common Core. I feel very conflicted about the Common Core, because I
think I'm changing my mind as we talk.
Yeah, it's really difficult for me.
I think I just got angry.
Common Core...
I came in pretty, like...
Common Core...
And now I'm mad.
Common Core aspires to get everyone to at least a certain level of something. That's what it tries to do. Now, my criticism...
I read a quote about this. Hold on.
Oh, please.
I know I actually found something. It is... the standard set a floor, not a ceiling. That's a direct quote from, I think, NPR.
Absolutely. Which to me is a double-edged sword, because I like the idea... I'm a very pro kind of liberal arts approach to education person.
That's the understatement.
I believe
of my
everyone
life.
should have a holistic education, and I think that English teachers should learn chemistry, and I think that chemistry people should learn about, early medieval polyphony. I think that everybody, this is very reflective of my undergraduate education too, which was very much a liberal arts approach in that kind of traditional sense, but I think that everyone should have at least some basic exposure to pretty much every field of knowledge
but that they can. A public high school's job?
Yes.
Or is that also contingent on their 4-year degree?
No, I think that what is happening is that people have to make up for deficiencies in kind of these common knowledge areas that I'm talking about in terms of liberal arts. They have to make up for them when they get to college, because students are not being exposed to them at the level that they should be in high school. And so colleges are trying to make up for that. But at the same time, it's really difficult for me, because I think something like Common Core establishes a baseline, and in so doing encourages and sometimes monetarily rewards teachers and administrators and districts for achieving the kind of bare minimum of what is acceptable in terms of
let me just be clear though, like the Ohio State report cards for public schools just got released, and it's like never good for anyone. So as much as we want to be like, oh, we're not, like, the state report cards for public schools are so hard to score well on, and it's like so exciting to get a C.
Yeah.
And I would consider my employer to be a pretty high achieving school district as far as offerings and things like that, opportunities, that type of thing. So, I mean, that's a whole nother double-edged sword if you want to go over there, too.
I think the problem is with the implementation of Common Core.
I don't disagree.
The implementation, it aspires to level a playing field, and in so doing, brings the whole playing field down a couple of notches from what it really could be if there were no attempt to level a playing field. If that makes sense.
I mean, I'm here for it.
And again, I don't blame, I especially do not blame teachers for this. This is never the fault of teachers.
I think that it was pretty young when it got moved around as quickly as it did. I mean, we're talking like they were released in 2010, but they had already announced the grants the year before, so they were expecting it. Like, it got moved pretty quickly as far as rollout.
In terms of a really
and I blame
huge
Bill and Melinda Gates and Pearson.
Let's talk about the role of the Gates Foundation in Common Core, because this is kind of a lesser known aspect of this, I think, for most people maybe. The National Governors Association kind of spearheaded the initial development of the Common Core standards, and they're the ones who actually own the copyrights of it.
Which I guess is like a teacher who makes $0, roughly, like take home. They probably saw Race to the Top and the rollout of the Common Core as a way to help boost teacher incomes, at least in some small, slight way.
Sure.
And so, I mean, that's something that everyone wants to vote for, that helps politicians get reelected. So I think if that's what they were going for, then, I mean, maybe they wanted to help teachers. But it just seemed really rushed.
I don't think anyone had any ill will toward teachers in the rollout of these things. And I mean,
except for the math teacher.
Well, yeah. The Gates Foundation is an interesting kind of study in the complicated nature of education policy. Because so Bill Gates is very interested in education, but has absolutely no experience talking to normal human beings, especially not teachers in public schools in the United States. He thinks he knows because he listens to these like audiobook lectures about education. He's very interested. So that's not how you know? No, he's very interested in education, but he means well, but he implements things in a way that is very foreign to the average public school teacher in the United States. So I sympathize with Bill Gates' interest in education, absolutely. And he's very complicated in my mind because he's a gajillionaire, but he's also a big-time philanthropist. But he sometimes, I would just love to sit down with him and be like, hey, listen, that's not really the way that this happens in the real world. So, this guy who doesn't know the price of groceries is trying to dictate. He doesn't know. Best Secret Santa on Reddit. Yeah, he's a great Reddit Secret Santa, but he does not know the price of a bunch of bananas from the grocery store or a gallon of milk. That's a great video, though. He tried. He's so disconnected from the real world that he does not know the price of common grocery items, but yet he's trying to dictate, in a way, through funding, what every public school student in America knows by the time they graduate high school. It's just this very troubling initiative funded by him and the National Governors Association and some big-time philanthropists who are also gajillionaires like he is. Again, a very fraught initiative from the get-go in terms of following the money. I think that, again, I do think they're actually trying to do good, but I think that, I mean, we can talk about the kind of aftermath. Well, doing poorly is not helping anyone. Yeah, right. And we kind of know now, we're starting to know, there haven't been very many studies on the actual effectiveness. There's a lot of questions of if it's actually succeeding. I think in 10 years, I mean, we're pushing 10 years, yeah. We should have an idea. But Ohio just switched their standardized tests recently. So that's a new rollout-ish, relatively new. That doesn't help us to better understand, I don't believe. Right. Because now we have a new test to teach to understand. It's been very difficult to measure the effectiveness of Common Core, which you would think would be one of the things that was built into the legislation. Let's see how this actually does. No, they didn't build that into the legislation. So it's kind of willy-nilly trying to evaluate the effectiveness of Common Core in states that adopted it or didn't adopt it or adopted it and rescinded. And there are just too many moving parts. Like, these new textbooks are called Common Core aligned. Because the Common Core doesn't put out anything of its own, textbook-wise. Right. So now Pearson, whoever else who does publishing, is doing their best to interpret these standards. Right. I think we're gonna have a whole outside. I think we're gonna have a whole episode on Pearson at some point. I would like to. At least. That can be just you. Pearson is a big, bad, scary name in education, but yes, there are worse. Trust me. But the question of like, is it failing? It's hard because there are new teacher evaluation systems. There are new testing systems. There's very little training on these standards. And so teachers are just kind of in this place of, I need a job and I need my kids to do well. And I want them to do well. But those are not always the same thing, if that makes sense. I think it's troubling that the Common Core standards were not developed with an accountability mechanism built in. For themselves. Right. So there are people trying to do studies on the effectiveness of Common Core right now, and they're kind of having mixed results, but most of them are saying either everyone stayed the same or got maybe a little bit worse. Right now. That's the consensus. We're waiting for some more studies to attempt to define the effectiveness of Common Core. I don't think 10 years is enough. I mean... It doesn't feel like enough. Not with changing graduation systems.
Not with new teacher eval systems.
Again,
not with
that's
and like Race to the Top is already gone.
But Common Core should
that money's already gone.
But Common Core should persist outside of all of those factors.
I don't disagree, but I'm saying and there's no sort of actual consistency in education. And so, like, my dad retired after 30 years of teaching, and he was a reading teacher, and he was a special ed teacher, and he ended his career as an 8th grade history teacher, social studies teacher. And he would always joke about his professional development to be like, it is the exact same thing, just with a new name. And so that's all that keeps happening. So the only sort of, I think if we could have some consistency along the way, as far as testing for students, as far as evaluations for teachers, Common Core might be able to prove itself as a little bit more realistic. Mm-hmm. But as long as there's so much money in testing and things like that, I don't think there's going to be a fair evaluation of the standards themselves.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult to get an idea of the effectiveness of any national policy in public education as long as there is education lobby money.
Yeah, but I don't think I would say the old standards were. The OGT was so heavily criticized. That was our Ohio graduation test before. And it was always like, okay, you could earn half points on things that didn't really make sense. They would have you draw things to earn points. And for some of the tests, like, a 60% was passing. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem... what standard is that?
Yeah, the problem is it's the attempt to establish a baseline minimum for high school proficiency. And this is what I was talking about before, where I'm like...
So if we're considering that the same as what the Common Core is attempting to do...
Yeah, everything's attempting to do this.
We didn't even talk about being college and career ready yet.
Well, being college and career ready was the objective of the Common Core. Yes. The Common Core is to try to make... Well, it really came out of this report in, I think, 2008 or something like that put us not as high as we wanted to be, maybe... in relation to other countries in terms of educational achievement. Our students were not doing as well on the kind of worldscape as we thought we would.
Which is such a bummer.
And again, there's a lot of really complicated and I think damaging rhetoric about the United States being the best in terms of this, this, and this. But at least in terms of our public education, we are falling behind other developed nations.
You can't argue it. No, we can argue about a lot of things that the U.S. might be the best at, but there's no way we can contend with.
The only way you could argue it is if you don't agree that we're the evaluation, the standards of evaluation. If you think that they're bunk, then you don't have to buy into our fading greatness. But I think it's kind of I think we really should pay attention to those things. And while in the United States we offer a lot of freedoms and opportunities that other nations don't have, what we don't offer is, I think, one of the core freedoms is the absolute best public education that a student can have at a grand scale. And to me, I think that's a fundamental freedom, and part of the reason I'm so interested in education to begin with is because I think it has to do to a great deal with the notion of personal freedom. Like, liberty does not come from anything other than education and knowing yourself and knowing the world and things like that. So I really respect the idea of the Common Core trying to put citizens in the United States in the best possible position to succeed and to attain personal liberty, but I don't think we're actually attaining it. So I think the way the Common Core was implemented, all it did was make teachers teach to the lowest common denominator of a test because that's what their job depends on, and nobody would blame them. So I think the implementation has been complicated,
problematic
at best. And I don't know how to. I think Race to the Top was a really interesting initiative because it tried to mitigate some of those troubling repercussions. It tried to reward teachers who did not really teach to the test, but who helped their students succeed the most. It was a weird, nebulous in-between thing that tried to help teachers who were innovative and creative in their classroom and
AKA knew how to play the game.
Yeah. Well, a game. I think that game is more worth playing than the idea of like teaching.
I learned some valuable things from being in a school that promoted project-based learning and that kind of thing. Like I use a lot of project-based learning in PBL still. And PBL is one of my favorite things that I was able to get. And I think that's because that was a big push of Race to the Top.
What's project-based learning?
Project-based learning is the idea that not everything has to end in a test, essentially. So that we can understand a student's learning based on a project or a product other than just multiple choice matching. You know what I mean? Like they can show their knowledge and their growth and their learning through something that isn't just a paper pencil test.
Right.
So like my kids, one of my favorite PBLs I do is that at the end of the Crucible, which is about the Salem witch trial, my students have to make a conflict chart that has at least 100 bubbles. And they have to include quotes and characters and all types of things. And so if students can create something as complex as 100 bubbles worth of conflict charts about the Salem witch trials, they know their stuff. Mm-hmm. They've already found the textual support. They can already identify all of the problems in the Salem witch trial. PBL tells me that my students can show their learning without having to take some test, but they can create some large, detailed, intricate, supportive poster board or app or however they want to show this conflict chart, and they know it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's great. I don't think everything should have to end in a test.
Right, but the way Common Core effectiveness is measured
is
in a test.
No, I know. But that was my claim for a Race to the Top. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm just connecting it back and kind of trying to point out the issue with this.
Well,
is that
I guess I would say that recently I sat on a committee in Ohio that helps to, I probably shouldn't get into like the specifics of what we do, but we help review test items essentially that could or could not end up on an EOC end of course exam for the state of Ohio that helps dictate the points that a student earns to graduate. And so one of the things that we do, and this is based on Common Core standards, is called like every question has a DOK, which is a difficulty of knowledge. So based on the difficulty of knowledge, the DOK number per item, that tells us what the grade scale should be and what sort of learning they should show based on the difficulty of knowledge.
Makes sense.
So I think in the case of our Ohio test, and I don't feel incredibly supportive of this test as a whole, but after seeing that side of it, I feel like maybe that's the goal, and maybe we're not going about it in the worst way.
What is the goal?
This baseline data, right? Like not baseline data. How do they say it? The floor. So if the standard set a floor, not a ceiling, the difficulty of knowledge per tested item at 1, which is the lowest it can be, is the floor, right? Whereas 5 or 4 DOK is a ceiling.
But don't you think that this causes a sort of undue focus on the floor rather than the ceiling?
I just think it sets an expectation, a minimum.
But shouldn't we
don't we need a minimum? Don't we need a goal?
Shouldn't we be setting an expectation of the highest possible? If you get to it, great. If you don't, that's what you can do, and congratulations.
Yeah, but I think you still have to define them.
Right, but we're being defined by the lowest common denominator, I think, with the Common Core. I mean, it's even in the name, just like what is common to everyone is going to be the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm. And some of our kids, that's where they are.
Right, which is fine, but I think that we should not define what is being taught on a day-to-day level by the path of least resistance.
But I don't think that teachers, like, I don't sit here and say, oh, well, that's all the band says, so I'm not going to do any more.
Right.
But I hope, like, when I'm planning, I say, okay, at least this. No. And then I go from there.
Of course, and again, this criticism is not of teachers. It's more of administrators and state
overlords.
State overlords. It's really a criticism more of administrators and state overlords and national overlords of education.
Let's keep calling them that.
Who are essentially holding teachers accountable to teachers are just trying to get by because their jobs are in limbo by this thing that they have. You don't have any control over what a kid brings to the classroom.
Well, no.
But the Common Core says you have to make what they bring to the next classroom better than how they started when they came to your classroom. And I think that's a fundamental unfairness that essentially bakes into a teaching cycle, a sort of way of teaching to survive. And again, it's not the teacher's fault.
It feels like survival.
But it feels like survival of the, most basic fit.
It does. I think I'm going to go on a limb here, but I am lucky to teach the kids that I teach, like my CP college prep kids. They care about their grades. They want to do well. They have motivation to succeed because they have a goal for post high school. One of my coworkers, who is probably the best teacher I've ever met in my entire life, has kids that don't care to be there, that can't read, that cannot write. And so I don't think it's fair for her to be judged on the same standard that I am based on data of two very different sorts of students.
But that's what the Common Core demands, right?
It does, but I think when you're frustrated by that minimum, I think of her and I think she's really pushing it to get there. But I'm not, if that makes sense. And so I guess if we're worried about our evaluations and our testing and all of these other things, she's putting in a lot of work to get to the floor. And I'm building an attic. You know what I mean? And I don't think that's right either. This isn't me endorsing that sort of thing. But I think if we want to protect teachers, we have to acknowledge that many of them are not in a position like mine.
Common Core gives the illusion that the floor for every student is the same and the ceiling for every student is the same. But it's absolutely not.
I think the ceiling is not the same.
No, but even when
the floor, yes, I'm with you.
No, I don't agree with that because I think that a kid who, quote unquote, doesn't want to be there or doesn't want to be learning or whatever, I think what's happening there really is that kid hasn't found some kind of education that works for them.
And that might be the case, but when I think of those kids, I think of the kids that I've seen at our gas station in town who are standing beside a car while their dad is being handcuffed and taken away by the cops. Teachers in their lives are doing different things than what I'm doing with my kids.
Absolutely, but I'm saying is that the Common Core is doing a disservice to those kids. But it's not because those kids don't want to learn anything. It's because they don't want to learn anything in an environment that is essentially the same as the environment that oppresses them in their day-to-day existence. So those kids require a different kind of standard of normal. So a common core says, no, everybody should have the same baseline. Those kids obviously shouldn't have the same baseline. So a Common Core is never going to do them a service because they don't, from the outside looking in, it seems like they don't appreciate education, but what they don't appreciate is the same kind of mode of existence that makes it difficult for them to get by in the day-to-day already.
They don't. I don't know. Some of our kids, the only place they are warm and have running water and get food is at school. Those are not those. I don't know. That's a tough one.
No, but I think that again.
But I don't think you can sit here and say that I don't think every kid wants to learn.
To me, I just think it's kind of basic principle of humanity that people do in fact want to learn, but they don't necessarily want to learn like public school tells them they have to learn. Kids who struggle with traditional classroom instruction, to teachers it seems like they don't want to learn, but I don't think they don't want to learn. I think they want to learn in a way that is in their language, as it were.
I don't even look at them and think they don't want to learn. I just think that if we want to bring up Maslow's, if you're not fulfilled, you can't.
No, but
a lot of these kids
absolutely.
can't because they come to school I mean...
But that's my point. It's not a question of whether or not they want to learn. It's a question of whether or not their needs are being met. And the Common Core absolutely does not care. It's completely agnostic to the needs of students approaching it. So what do we feel? Common Core?
I'm just mad.
Good or bad? Oh, you're just mad?
More wine.
You want more wine?
And I think that...
Do you want less Common Core?
No. I want the understanding to be that a lot of kids want to learn, but are in a position to.
Yeah.
We've had students who turned 18, juniors and seniors, whatever brought them our way at this point, that they're on a list. And it's a list that the teachers who have them know about. And it's a list that once they turn 18 and they can drop out, and that every day that we see them, we tell them how happy we are to see them. And that we're so glad they're there. And for a lot of kids, that works. I've seen some of my coworkers and I, some kids that we really pushed to get through, who didn't have a lot going for them except for maybe us. And we would just it was so exciting to see them show up. One day a week, we couldn't believe she was there. This one girl I'm thinking about, she's one of my favorites. I used to watch her smoke at the bus stop all the time. But she turned 18 and we were all like, we're never going to see her. That's it. She's done. But she made it. I don't know everything about her story, but I know that maybe the few of us that were stoked to see her were probably the only positive thing she saw. And I don't know if it's bad for us to say the goal was to get her here, and we did. She's not everyone, but I think kids in some positions, they might want to learn, but they're not in a position to learn. And I always see this thing come up on Facebook that's like, if a kid's loved at home, they come to school to learn. But if they're not loved, they come to school to be loved. And so I think that's not something the Common Core can measure. But I think if what we care about is getting them through, then maybe having a ceiling is not attainable for a lot of them, but a floor is reasonable. Mm-hmm. I don't want us to only get our kids here. And I don't think teachers only get them here and consider it a job well done. I know with her and some others that are like her, the kids that we're excited to see on their birthdays and after they've turned 18, maybe the minimum isn't the worst place. Because at least we've been stable and she's been there and she's been accounted for and she's not on the street and she's not in a lot of places she could be. And not every kid has that. I mean, most of our kids aren't those stories. Most of our kids want to be there, especially in my district, you know. I got smart kids. I have determined kids. And not that she wasn't determined, but her survival looked different.
Different kind of determination.
Than a lot of other kids.
Sure.
You know? I don't hate the idea that we hope everyone gets to at least here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a bad thing, so to speak.
No, I think that's a positive outlook on a Common Core.
I mean, I'm not here to wave its flag and take it to Pearson and be like, you're the best thing ever, but when I think of kids like that, her getting there was a big accomplishment. Not only for her, but for all of us, and for all of her teachers. Mm-hmm. Who saw her and were happy to see her. Mm-hmm. And I don't hate that. So do you hate the Common Core? Where are you?
I'm completely ambivalent about the Common Core.
I think I'm back to not being angry.
My instinct is to not like it, but you make it really difficult to feel feelings of negativity sometimes.
No,
so
I don't.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Common Core hit me up at no. No, I don't know. I think of her and I think of other kids that I've seen drop out that I wish wouldn't have, and I don't. Man, it's hard. Mm-hmm. There's no one way, but I understand what you mean about we shouldn't want kids to only have this, as this analogy says, the floor. But I think if we want the American education system to have a chance, I think, don't we have to set a minimum expectation? Isn't that the question?
I don't know. I do not know the answer to that.
I mean, but isn't that the question that we're getting at?
That is the question.
Don't we say at least our graduates do these things?
I think we need to do at least 50 more podcast episodes before we approach the correct answer to that question.
I I mean, I think I know the answer because the conversion meter tells me, but I don't think I know the answer.
The wine is telling you the right answer.
No, I just mean, though, like, you were talking earlier about the European education system, and we always hear, like, oh, the Europeans, like, generally speaking across the board, their education system is incredible. Good for them. They also pay their teachers. Good for them. Mm-hmm. But shouldn't we at least say all of our kids can do this? I don't know. Maybe not.
The difficulty there to me is...
I think that's what it's getting at,
But I don't think all of our kids are the same. I don't think all of our kids should be able to do this. Even if this... Even if this is a minimum, I don't think it's fair to every kid who goes through the public education system to require them to do this. I don't think that brains and minds are standardized in that way. So I don't necessarily think that it makes sense to say all of our kids can do this, because all of our kids are different and talented in their own ways and directions.
Which also fulfills these standards.
But why do we want all of our students to be able to do exactly the same thing?
I don't take it that way at all.
But that's what the Common Core is established to do.
I don't think it's saying we're going to churn out a million little robots who only do these things.
No, but
I think it's saying we're going to churn out a million little robots who do at least these things. They're not even robots because they all have these.
No, that's problematic to me. I don't want to churn out a million little anything who do the same anything.
They all do it differently.
No, they don't. But I mean,
come into my classroom. Watch all my kids find an answer to something. None of them get to it the same way. They might have the same answer, but they didn't get it the same way.
But that's not what the test does not boil it down to how they got it. It boils it down to whether or not they got it. That's really the issue with the Common Core. Again, it's not the theory. It's the practice of the Common Core that to me is problematic. It's just like the Common Core. If you have a multiple choice question on a Common Core inspired test, a student who answers A and another student who answers A, if it's the correct answer and the same answer, and one student got to it one way and another student got to it another way, the test doesn't care about that. And so the implementation of Common Core, even if the ideal of Common Core is the same, it doesn't.
But isn't that what we want? Don't we want them to think on their own to get there?
Yeah, we do. Get to the answer? But we don't want to evaluate them on just their answer, which is exactly what happens.
How do they graduate? What do we do instead?
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But I do think that it's wrong to evaluate them on just getting the correct answer. And I mean,
there are other DOK sorts of questions require multiple choice, select all, it apply, writing based. I think it tries to give kids an opportunity to show that their brain might work a little bit differently.
But I think even the same, I think the very fundamental principle of everyone should be able to do this is possibly flawed. And again, this goes against my deepest feelings about everyone having a kind of baseline liberal arts education, which is also another competing part of my brain that is at odds with this one. But I'm trying to weigh the importance of individuality against a broad and expansive kind of education for all.
I just think about society, and I think, you know what, I would like for members of my society, voting members in my communities, constituents, whatever, you know what, maybe it would be nice if they could identify these types of things. Mm-hmm. I know that's exactly the kind of Common Core that I could get on board with. This kind of shared civic knowledge that we need to exist. These things seem necessary for us to have a harmonious coexistence. Absolutely. So you basically want a Common Core that doesn't have a standard, like a set, whatever.
I think what I want is a Common Core that doesn't have a standardized test along with it.
What'd you learn this week?
Yeah, I think we need to get on to that. I learned this week about so we're kind of video game nerds, to say it in a conservative way. We are nerdy about certain video games. I really like
no names.
We have several gaming consoles, and I grew up playing video games on the PC. So we're kind of big nerds about this. So I've just learned in the last couple of days about this thing called Untitled Goose Game.
But we haven't played it.
We haven't played it. No. We haven't played it, but I've learned about it. It's available on the Switch, which I have. So I think we can play this thing. You play as a random goose on, I think, a farm. This is what I've been trying to figure out.
But can I just say though that our one true saint, Chrissy Teigen, tweeted about it.
Okay.
And that's all it takes for me to care.
Okay.
Disagree?
That's all it requires for some.
Do you have higher expectations?
I just
She's not a floor, honey. She's a ceiling.
You play as a goose aiming for the ceiling. You're a goose who's kind of making general mischief on a farm, is what I have gathered from what I have read so far about this thing. What did you learn about this week?
I really wish I had something better. Well, my public speaking kids told some really good jokes.
Okay.
What do you call a cow with no legs? Any guesses?
Wait, a cow with no legs? I can't even. What?
What do you call a cow with no legs?
I don't know.
Ground beef.
Oh no.
Oh yes.
Oh no. Mm-hmm. Oh no. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Okay, do you want one more?
Please.
This one isn't as good.
Oh, it's okay. I want to hear it anyway.
What do you call a guy with no nose?
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Ha! I got it!
You have to cut this one out. It's not as funny if you know it. Hold on. There's another good one I really like.
Okay.
Ground beef was one of my other ones. Why did the golfer pack 2 pairs of pants?
I don't know.
He got a hole in one.
Oh no!
And those jokes are brought to you by my public speaking class 6th period.
Congratulations.
A group of 9th through 12th graders.
You're gonna be famous.
Are these the applesauce people? I actually don't know. I didn't Google him. I want him to be the applesauce guy.
The applesauce people.
Is he?